Governments in developing countries are increasingly running development assistance programs where they're trying to distribute aid of various types to their poorest citizens, right? So even though we may think of aid to the poor as something coming from rich to poor countries, in fact, most of the aid to the poor is actually coming from and administered by developing country governments themselves. But when a government wants to give aid to its poorest citizens, it has this fundamental challenge of how does it figure out who's poor? Broadly speaking, there are a couple of different approaches that you can try. And so what my co-authors and I have done is worked with the government of Indonesia to run various experiments to try to figure out which of these different approaches is most successful in reaching the poor households. The second set of experiments we ran was kind of within the proxy means test context, and it asked a slightly different question. It said, should the government just kind of try to find everybody it can, or should it instead open a registration center and say, well, anyone who is interested in this program, come apply first, and then we'll do the proxy means test question on you. So we were comparing what's known as automatic enrollment. The government just kind of does the census, and if you qualify, you get the program, versus what we called self-targeting, or on-demand application, where people have to come to a center, apply, and then get the benefits. And again, like all these things, there are trade-offs. On the one hand, you might think that people who are really poor, they might not be able to come to the center. They might, have trouble, getting time off work, or they might just not be able to handle the bureaucracy of doing that. On the other hand, it's possible that the government, in trying to find all the poor people, it might miss kind of the most marginalized people. Often the poor kind of live at the fringes of kind of the village. The central government enumerators might not even know where they live. If you open up the on-demand application center, they can make themselves available. Moreover, none of these means test methods are perfect, right? They're proxies for income, and so therefore they may not pick up income perfectly. By asking people to come to the application center, the people who sort of look at their own income and say, well, gee, I'm actually pretty rich, or I'm at least middle class, like I don't need this program, or it's not really for me, or I'm not likely to qualify if I got it, they're not going to bother to apply. And that self-selection can actually just eliminate a lot of the sort of what are called inclusion errors from the program. People who would have fallen through the cracks and gotten excluded, even though they didn't really deserve it, they're not going to bother to apply, and therefore the government can do a better job screening. And what this experiment found, this is an experiment we conducted with the Indonesian government in about 600 villages in multiple provinces of Indonesia, we found that the self-targeting method actually worked better, that the selection of people who came were much poorer, about 20% poorer. The beneficiaries that the government selected through this method were on average about 20% poorer. And that's because the people who were richer, who might have fallen through the cracks and gotten included by mistake, they self-selected out. So in sum, I think what this research suggests is a couple of lessons for sort of governments interested in targeting. The first is that on-demand application, at least as we've tried it, doesn't seem to result in excluding a lot of people, and in fact helps the government by having the people who really don't kind of deserve the programs or aren't the most meritorious self-select themselves out. And the second is we found that there's potentially a really important role for community-based targeting, particularly because it allows communities to use their own local concepts of poverty in determining who should get assistance.